Hello, and welcome to Interdependent Study, our podcast where we engage in the learning and unlearning work for social justice and collective liberation. I'm Aaron.
And I'm Damien. Thank you so much for joining us today.
For those new to our podcast, Interdependent Study is meant to be a space and community for folks who believe in and want to do the work of social justice.
Each week, we bring something new to the table and discuss our thoughts and feelings about it through the lenses of who we are and where we can go for a more just society.
That's right. And we want Interdependent Study to be a space we're always learning with one another. And so this week, we've actually got something a little bit different.
What?
Right. We aren't quite ready to talk about the book that we mentioned last week. So instead, we're going to do a little activity.
Yeah.
We've got here a brand new box of conversation starter questions from a company called The Skin Deep. They do a bunch of videos and stuff on YouTube. And the activity that they have created is called The And. These questions specifically that we have are from the On Racism edition. And so the description from and it's a collaboration, I should say, with The Body Is Not an Apology and Didier Sylvan. Cool stuff.
Yeah.
And here's the description from the back of the box. In your hands is a valuable tool for the necessary and challenging work of undoing racism. Each question in this deck will provoke introspection and investigation as you examine the ways racism has permeated our lives. We invite you to open yourself to the uncomfortable as you explore, educate, and inform yourself and others through honest dialogue, whether solo, one-on-one, or in a group. So, sounds like some pretty good stuff.
Yeah.
What we're going to do is each ask each other a couple of questions from the 199 card deck that they give you when you buy this little set, and then have a conversation that way. So we'll kind of go back and forth, asking each other the questions that we chose. So yeah, that's kind of the plan today. We're not going to do application or homework or any of that stuff because we're just having a conversation, doing an activity together.
Yeah,
so,
we just cracked open this box. So
literally.
And I didn't know that it was $199. That's a choice.
It is a choice. Yeah, I don't know. I was like, you didn't want to add one more for 200.
One more.
All of the boxes are 199 questions.
Wow.
Like all of the editions.
Okay, good to know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So yeah. So neither of us know what the other's going to ask. We're gonna get into some dialogue here and talk through whatever it was the questions are that we chose.
I love it. That's the whole point of it. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So you want me to go first?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
All right.
So I've got these two cards here. I got to decide which one I should ask you first. All right. So I'm going to go with this question, which is, and I don't know if this is faux pas. I might add a word to this. Okay. What personal experience has informed your relationship to the police? What personal experience has informed your relationship to the police?
Sure. I assume you're not talking about like the band, Roxanne.
Let me see what's on the back of this card. Yeah, Roxanne.
Message in a bottle. No, that's not. Okay.
I don't think so.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. The police. I got it. Well, that's a good question. I, in a few different ways, grew up in sort of, I think, more working class neighborhoods. And there was a sense that if they were there, like it wasn't good news for anybody. Mm-hmm. And so that's, I think, the predominant thing in my head.
Right.
That is, I think, informs my, I guess, relationship to policing, is that none of us were like, yay, in the neighborhood. So
right.
I think that's mostly it. I mean, there's some other like sort of more intense experiences that were like sort of not really later in life, but like I was a teenager.
Okay.
And it wasn't necessarily me personally, and it wasn't I wasn't in trouble, but I was never comfortable even when they were, sort of there for us, so to speak.
Yes.
So yeah, I don't know. I think that
Just this idea that, if they were around, it wasn't for
like
a happy reason, a good
Right.
reason. We weren't excited for them to be there.
no.
Yeah,
Yeah. That's
absolutely.
yeah.
And that sort of sticks to this day, you think? Like, especially some of those younger experiences, right? It's amazing how those things inform us.
Yeah. I
stay
mean,
with
even
us.
for my work for a number of years, I was on call
right.
and responding to any kind of issues that might have happened on campus at an institution, 2 of them. And a lot of our protocols involved sort of calling campus police to respond to certain things.
Yeah.
And there were a number of officers in my last job where I did this kind of, where this was part of my actual work. There were just like a terrible, like they were difficult to interact with.
Yeah.
So like it made us, and we all of my colleagues who did the same thing, we all knew who we were. Each of us were talking. We were like, "Oh, you had so and so."
Yes.
At that incident. So, yeah, it's not like I've had a ton of like super awesome experiences.
Right.
Even being sort of on the same side, so to speak, in responding to a crisis or and real crises of and emergencies that where like EMTs are there and students are getting transported for
Right.
Alcohol poisoning or whatever it might be. Just the sort of attitude they had in working with us sometimes wasn't productive, wasn't helpful.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. That's good to know. Was your thought that I was going to answer this question too, or did you want to ask me your question first? Like, what do you think?
Well, I mean, do you want to answer that question or would you rather not?
Yeah. I'll answer it. I think, so this idea of being Black, growing up Black, right? Like there is the talk, the conversation, all right, that I think all Black parents feel like they have to have with their children about what it is that you do, right? When you were in the same room, the same space as the police, right? And so I distinctly remember my parents sitting me down and talking about that, right? And especially, in my upbringing, I sort of grew up, I would say, sort of middle class to then upper middle class, and we were oftentimes in predominantly white neighborhoods and white spaces, right? If we weren't around family, and so I think my parents, in some ways, felt that would have kept me safer, right? But also meant that in any given space that I could be, right, there might be actions or things that might occur that could have the police called, right?
Yeah.
And so, you have to have that conversation. So I remember that. I also distinctly, I still think about this to this day, a time when 2 of my friends and I were pulled over, and they were also both Black men. We were teenagers. We were pulled over by the police. And rightfully so, right? We were young teenagers out driving a little too fast. And so got pulled over. But still just like the feeling of that, right? Like sitting in the back seat, the fear. Was real, right? And thankfully nothing happened and we were let go. But we now know, we have lots of evidence that scenario could have been deadly for the 3 of us. So, I remember that fear viscerally. Yeah. And it is a fear that I think to this day, right? Like anytime you and I have been in the car, right?
Yeah.
And there have been sirens or things, right? And I've had an audible reaction to that, right? Or I have gotten tense, and you have witnessed that and seen that. So
have you seen me have the same tension when I'm like if I'm driving?
No, I haven't, and I don't know
because it happens every time.
Yeah,
I'm like a ball of I don't know what nerves.
That's fascinating. No, because you know what I think. Well, obviously, I'm consumed by my
you're paying attention.
But I think in many ways I have felt, and I don't know what this is, like maybe it's because you're a white man, but also we're friends, right? I have felt comforted by you because I think there have been times where I've voiced my, and you've agreed. And maybe it's because you've got your own stuff, right? And you can understand it. And obviously I know we talk about this every week. But in many ways I felt comforted by your presence in those situations as opposed to any perception of what you might be experiencing.
Sure.
So,
yeah. Okay.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So you got to ask me your question.
Yeah. All right. So my question is, how do you think we view justice differently?
How do I think we view justice differently? The we here being me and you.
Yeah.
Okay. How do I think we view justice differently?
If at all. I
If
guess.
at all, yeah. I'm trying to think about how we might view justice differently, because I think we're both really invested in these conversations that we have, this learning that we do, this unlearning work that we do, and I think have really dived deeply into abolition, right? And what that means and what the possibilities are for what, our society, our world could be. And so I don't know. I feel like the conversations we've had when we've talked about this, we've been in alignment in so many ways, right? In a lot of critical ways. So yeah, I'm curious to hear if you think that we've got if we differ in our thinking, in our beliefs around justice and what justice could look like, right? Because I'm struggling to think of where we might be different. You have a look in your face.
No, I don't know that I have an answer to this question either. I think that
the look in your face was like, aha.
No.
Okay, good.
No. As I was flipping through the cards, I was like, well, I think this is an interesting conversation because there are ways that we, I think, have found more alignment as we've done this work together and like learned more together, that I think maybe wasn't always the case a few years back, right? Before we started doing this. And I don't know that it would be drastically different.
Right.
It would be like, we're in the same ballpark, but like sitting in different sections, right?
Absolutely.
Like it's not, it wasn't ever drastically different, but I was like, oh, this is an interesting conversation because I think when we think about people having different opinions on justice or anything really, we think about them being diametrically opposed.
Right.
And I think there's people who can be on the same side of a spectrum, but have different views of what that outcome should be or what that justice should be.
Yeah.
That I just was curious if you had anything that came to mind for you.
Yeah.
Because I don't know that I do, but I just think it's an interesting conversation to have generally about how we differ, even if we're looking in the same direction.
Absolutely. Well, and I will say that, and a lot of this is just the notion of growing up and being an adult and being in situations and whatnot, and witnessing what happens on the news, what happens to people across the country, right? But my thoughts around justice and what it looks like, as a kid, as a teenager, right, with all that we're taught about it, what we're taught about the criminal punishment system, and that there are good people and bad people, right? Right? Like, oh, my views have drastically evolved, right, as I have gotten older, and now that we're sort of engaged in this work, when we've read some brilliant scholars, right? It looks very different than it did, 10 years ago, 20 years ago.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I think we would probably I think we are in alignment in so many ways. But yeah, it's a fascinating concept. I like it. Good. All right. All right. So it's my turn to ask you a question.
That's right.
This is not that difficult, Damien. All right. So the question I picked here is a little forward thinking. How do you hope we will talk about race in 20 years?
Wow.
Yeah. How do you hope we will talk about race in 20 years?
So 20 years sounds like it's a long way off.
Yeah.
And it's not.
It's not.
So, the I don't know. Like, so I think about 20 years ago from today, how we would talk about race, right, in 2003 versus now, and that kind of being, I don't know, a way to think about what it might be in
I think it's a good way to think about it. Yeah. Oh, God, 2043.
That's how that math works.
I sure did. You mathed successfully, and it just hurt my feelings a little bit. That's all.
So, yeah, I'm not sure. So I think about that difference. I feel like there's more awareness that there are issues today, broadly, right?
Yes.
Like, lots of people knew and were organizing and doing all kinds of work 20 years ago, and they knew there were like all of the things that happen now what were happening then.
Yep.
But I think broadly there's just more awareness of all of it.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know, I think a lot more white folks in particular have woken up to some of and seen some of what the realities are. So I don't know, in 20 years, hopefully it's not going to be gone.
No.
Hopefully in 20 years we're talking about it with even more awareness broadly.
Yeah.
We're just sort of continued to chip away and make progress and shift all of our sort of collective thinking on it. And I don't know, maybe we've abolished something. I don't like. I don't know. So that would be interesting to see what that looks like. How has like economies shifted? How have economies shifted? How have I don't know. What's it look like to get a job? Like,
yes.
do people feel that fear when they see a cop anywhere in their rearview mirror that people feel now? Like, and all of those things. So,
yes. Yeah.
That's, I guess, my hope, because the question was, what do I hope?
Yes. How do
I hope?
We'll talk about race in 20 years.
So I hope we'll be able to talk about progress that we've made that's more tangible than the progress that I can talk about right now from 20 years ago to today.
Yes.
So, maybe somebody, like a kid 20 years from now, you talk about that experience of getting pulled over when you were a teenager. Maybe 20 years from now, a similar age teenager doesn't have that same fear when they get pulled over.
Wouldn't that be something?
Like, not that people who experience that wouldn't still have it, but that the new people introduced to that situation wouldn't have it. I guess that's my hope, is that the way that fear rules how we learn about each other, engage with each other, that fear has dissipated or is dissipating.
Yeah.
And that we can talk sort of even more, like, I feel like I'm rambling, but we can talk very clearly about how things were in 2023 and how they're not that way in 2043. That's my hope.
I love that. Well, and it's fascinating. When I picked this question, I didn't think about 20 years ago, right? So I love that lens, and that's, I think this is what you bring to the table. So when you said that, I immediately thought about the fact that I was in college, right? 20 years ago, right? And I was just with a friend last night. We were talking about how we've been friends for 20 years, right? I've known you, Aaron, for 10 years, right?
Yep.
So, but thinking about the ways in which we were talking about race in 2003, and thinking about even, and to your point, there were lots of brilliant folks doing brilliant work, organizing work, all of that. So setting that aside, this idea of the ways in which we did diversity trainings, the ways in which we just talked about race, I feel is drastically different than we do now, right? And so in some ways, I love what you said and what it made me think of 20 years from now. I hope it's a bit more effortless, right? And it is easy for folks to acknowledge things and talk about race and all of the dimensions of diversity, right, that exist. Right, because I think it's very different than some of those. I just think about some of those activities we had to go through, those diversity exercises and activities that we went through 20 years ago, and it is, some of them are wild to think about where we were, what we were doing then versus what we do now. So yeah, I love that.
Yeah, that was a good question.
You right? I thought it was good.
All right, well, similar vein, I think.
Oh, wow. Okay.
My question, it's not specific. Anyway, similar. Similar style of question. What are your dreams about racial justice and equity?
Yeah, I see the similar there. I like that. Say it one more time for me.
What are your dreams about racial justice and equity?
I guess I really am hopeful that all of the aforementioned work that we talk about, that organizers and activists and these brilliant scholars that we read and take in and talk about, the vision for abolition, right? The North Star we've talked about, right? That we're there, right? I hope one day we're there.
Yeah.
I recently was with family and with my niece and nephew, and they're both teenagers, and was talking to them, and particularly my nephew, about, racism and racist things that have taken place in his school, right? And the way in which he sort of acknowledged it and said, yeah, it happens, right? And kind of shrugged it off, right? And I think verbatim what I said to him was, it happens, right? And we have to deal with it and we move on, right? But the way in which he and my brother, his father, and I talked about some of the things that have happened in the school, so I have the context.
Right.
I hope in the future that stuff just doesn't exist anymore, right? That stuff doesn't happen in schools, and that young people just have get to navigate a world where that stuff just doesn't happen, right? So that's what I'm hopeful for, if that makes sense.
It does. I think the other thing I think about that's maybe not, it's not the end point of the dream, but a step along the way maybe, is that when those things do happen in the meantime, between now and the reality of that dream, that the school knows how to handle it, and the schools knows how to respond, and support the sort of target of that incident, or the person who's affected by that harm, and find ways to hold the other person accountable to what it is that they've done to the community, to people, like whatever that might look like in that situation. That would be a great step.
It would be huge
too, right?
That would be huge. And think about the ripple effect of that.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I think that's a great dream. I don't know that I have a good, concise answer for this. I'm mentally all over the place right now with this.
Yeah. It's a big question.
It's huge. And all of the people that we've read or watched things from, I'm thinking about all of them now, like Robin D.G. Kelly and so many people. I guess, my hope is that the second part of that question is equity. Is that people have what they need. So people have a home, people have those sort of basic physical needs, and they're not worried about the water getting shut off because, right, water is a human resource, like we need it to survive, and so having to worry about that is bizarre in so many ways. So
Right.
yeah, I think that people have what they need, and that there's more. I don't know. I said this on the last question, but like less fear.
Yes.
Like, because I think so many, like the things that you're talking about with what's happening in schools, is so much of that is there's fear, maybe not obviously on the surface, but the core of that is some kind of fear.
Absolutely.
And so I think that's another aspect of a dream for racial justice and equity is there's no fear of each other, of
of not having what you need. You know, I love that, especially in just in our society and the resources that we have. Right, we have what we need to take care of each other.
Yep.
It's just a matter of getting there,
Yeah,
right,
exactly.
and doing what's necessary to get us there. So I love that. Well, that's a great question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
This was a great little activity and
It's a
and
good
box.
exercise. Yeah.
Yeah, and that was what 4 questions of 199. So
Yep. We can do this a few more times.
we can. We'll keep this just in case there are future times where we're not quite ready, or we just want to come back to it.
Yeah.
Now that I know what's in the activity box, I think we could look at each other and say, let's do that again.
Yeah.
So
Definitely.
I love it. Very good. You want to? What was it called again?
It's called the And. Look up the Skin Deep cards on the Google machine or whatever your search engine of choice is.
That's right.
theskindeep.com is where you can find these cards. And they have a variety of other sort of topics and things. And this one just is their on racism edition.
I love it.
Yeah.
Very good.
Yeah. All right. Well, so that's it for our activities today. And so thanks for joining us. Damien, you're up next time. And so we already know this a little bit, but if you want to refresh
just
remind each other and any folks who might be listening, what is it you're bringing to the table in our next episode?
That's right. I'm bringing a book to the table for our next episode. It's called Abolishing State Violence, A World Beyond Bombs, Borders, and Cages. It's written by Ray Aikson, I should say. And so this book is an in-depth analysis of the connections that exist between policing, prisons, surveillance, borders, war, nuclear weapons, capitalism, right? And all of the incredible organizing efforts for the abolition of all of those things. And so it has been a joy to read this book. It has been so eye-opening. There's lots of just incredible stats and figures and information about what's going on across our globe as it relates to all of these things. And so it's been awesome to read this book. So I'm really looking forward to talking about it next time.
Yeah, me too. It is really great. There's a lot of great analysis and thinking in and tying things together that I haven't necessarily thought of before. So yeah, excited to talk about that
Absolutely.
next week.
All right. Well, with that, we want to thank you for joining us today for this special episode and for listening to Interdependent Study. You know what we're going to ask you to do here, but in case you forgot, please follow, leave a rating and review, share our podcast with the people in your life, follow us on social media, check us out on YouTube. Shout out to Molly for that. And sign up for our email list to get notified about any new things we've got going on behind the scenes.
Yes. Shout out, Molly. Thank you so much for listening. And remember, it's not about us, but it is about us. And we'll talk to you next week.